Hello, everyone in the live stream. Can you give me a thumbs up that you can hear me loud and clear over there? Okay, so everybody got a lot more experience in with our spaceship. Just got to use a lot of techniques in a much looser setting since it's a spaceship, and everyone's doing a good job getting things together there, and we'll get that render. We'll look at how some of the renders went on Wednesday and get some feedback on those stills, and then come back to that, so that we can have maybe a couple different angles and then a video clip of that for our portfolios, in addition to what we have for our playground. But our other scene, in the past, we've made like a full-on kitchen, I think, but we usually don't do the spaceship thing for as long as we did. So we'll be sort of truncating that down to more of just sort of like a table still life kind of scene here, where we get to work on some things. But one of the first things is we got some table and chairs here. What we're going to focus on is modeling these to scale. So there we go, orange. We'll look at the chair here first, and we'll use some of our box modeling techniques that we know now to get our chair together. But the first part of this is that we've got this chair reference that we can use here in Blender. And so calibrating to scale. We want to create a bounding box that is the correct size. So the bounding box being a cube, a box for whatever it is that you're making, like the box that thing would fit into. And then we import the reference, and then we scale the reference to the bounding box. And that way we know that our reference is at the correct size, and we can use that when we're modeling in order to get everything together. So with that in mind, let's look at this, and we can bring this in here under image reference. Makes this a little bit easier. And so I'll come over here and grab our chair like so, and it just comes in at the camera view by default. I'm going to get rid of the camera for now. We're not going to need that. Primarily working on modeling today, and we don't really need this light right now either. So let's bring that in. Let's be sure to pack resources so that this this is ostensibly a texture. We want it to come along with everything else. And so let's save as. Over here, and over here. Cool. Okay, and now, so as where the spaceship project was, a lot freer creatively, here we're just going to try to hone in on our ability to try and properly represent something given the reference for it. Let's get rid of this cube for now, and we've got this. I'm going to Alt-G and select this, Alt-G, select this, Alt-R. That gets us how we want. And so now let's get this oriented. And so I'm going to make sure that I have my gizmos, and let's bring this up. Make sure that I have it correct. And we don't need to line up all of the views here. I find it most useful to have this and this properly represented here. But for right now, we need to sort of pay attention to the size of the box here. And if we look at this, we have essentially like 49 centimeters in this direction and 89 centimeters in this direction, and then about 41, or let's call it 42 in that direction. So we can start with our bounding box here. Let's bring back the cube that I just deleted. So I suppose we don't need to delete it. And in our down here, we can use our size to get things correct here. Not the scale, the menu that's created here. And so we want to get this top one here correct, and that's going to be, we'll call it 90 centimeters. And the nice thing here is that we can just, whether it's in metric or imperial, we can type in the units there and it'll make it the correct size. Right, and so now we know that's the correct height. And I'm going to turn on the X-ray for right now. And let's move this up. I'm going to turn this off for a second. And there we go. And so that's the correct height. And so now let's get this properly scaled. So I'll grab this and scale it down. And I'm going to get the side view here lined up. So I'll bring this over and try and get this S. Now, this is going to be the best possible scenario where we have something that looks like, blueprints for the object. A lot of times it's not quite so clean, and you have to worry about the camera distortion. But in this case, we're just going to try and be as close as we can. And so here, yeah, we got it to 90, and that looks good. And so now we can come in and make our adjustments if we know the top matches. And so now we can come in and grab our other parts here. For instance, here. And here. And bring those in. Again, I'm in edit mode. So just trying to get this correct. And then we want to have things correct in the other direction as well. Let's tab back out. Let's relabel the cube here. And so this is going to be a bounding box. And then over here, this is going to be side reference. And then over here, we're going to need to duplicate the reference. And so I'll go ahead and Shift D this, or just Control C, Control V. And here, let's rotate this in the other direction. Whoops. And I want the front on here. Again, let's look through this. And tab. And we just want to come in this direction. And tab out. Make sure that the bounding box wasn't scaled strangely. That's good. All right, and let's save incremental. And so now, I have that, and then I have this, right? So lining everything up properly gives me a good base to work from. And so I'll be able to essentially, trace this outline with my topology. But, we still need, having the other views here are helpful to sort of fill in the blanks at different parts. And, it's not going to be as easy as always just lining it up 100% with whatever the image is. You have to sort of make it work given the situation there. Great. Okay. So with this in mind, let's look at a few things. The construction of the chair here, we've got some kind of seat, and then we have this other part that's all coming together. And so we're going to start with like the frame and then put the seat probably on as a separate part later. And so let's try and make the rest of this as much as one mesh as we can. And so we're going to be actually using a lot of inset and extrude here to make this happen. We're not going to be, making separate cubes for each of these pieces. And because this is a symmetrical thing, we can use the mirror modifier and then only have to model half of the thing. With the reference here, bringing in as a reference allows us to do a few things. One that I find useful is that you can only show it in orthographic or perspective. And so I think that's pretty useful to having this off in perspective so we can look at what we're doing. But then when we come here to line things up, it shows up like so. And also we can sort of turn down the opacity of the image in both, so that makes it a little bit easier to see what's going on with our modeling there. All right, so when I'm just wheeling around, it goes away, but then when I dial this in, I can see it right there, which is super useful. Okay, let's come over here to the side and look at how this might be and how we could put some of this together. We've got these parts, and so we can start with perhaps this part and this part of the frame and then bridge them together. Thinking about anytime we get a change in direction, we're going to need to have some sort of cut across the object there. And the bounding box is good. I'm going to turn that off for right now, and we can get started with some of the other stuff. So let's Shift A and bring in a cube and use this as our starting point. And immediately I'm going to tab into edit mode here and put this in this zone right here. So I'm going to also make sure that I have my face orientation on to make sure, especially when I'm scaling some of these things, that I don't drag them inside out. We can always fix that later, but you get the idea. And so I can bring this in, bring this down in this direction. Again, I'm in edit mode, so I'm not going to need to apply scale later. It's pretty close. I'm just trying to line up the foot of this right there, like so. And also let's check in from the other side, because this is obviously like way off. If we look at this, we want this just to be over here. And so let's bring this way in. Right, this is one of those, like, how wide across is this? Because it's obscured by this one. We can assume it's like around this size, right? Okay, that's pretty good. And let's look at it from the other side. Okay, we're in a pretty good starting point here. And for the sake of clarity, I'm going to go ahead and start this as chair. And let's put our mirror modifier on. Let's tab back out. And part of the advantage of tabbing into edit mode immediately is that the origin stays right at the middle. And so when I apply the mirror modifier, I need to be symmetrical on the Y here. If I hit bisect, if you hit bisect and it goes away, that means it's copying the blank side. So you would flip it, come back. We don't need bisect on right now, right? It's just going to be, we're good at this point. And so we can sort of see what happens as we move along. Let's come back over here and grab this and save incremental. As always, creating a trail for our work. And we can create this angle here, not by rotating, because if we rotated, that would disturb our angle down here, right? And so if we come into this and tab into edit, and then look at the top of this back here, and just grab this top face, and come back over here and hit G. We can sort of move this into position and create the angle that we need for the back of the chair there. This is, yeah, we did this in the class right before this. Let's save. And in this case, I think maybe having two views might be helpful. And so you can tear off up here to get one and have this sort of open over here. And because there's a lot of situations where it might be easier to click on something to select it here and then move it here. Remember, moving in orthographic view is always more precise than sort of perspective view, but you only have access to 2 dimensions, right? The thing that makes it precise also makes it, it's showing you less information, right? You only see 2 dimensions. Okay, so now, there we go. Let's move this over. We've got that. Let's check in over here. Yeah, that's pretty good. And so we can make the shape just with some extrusions, right? So there needs to be an angle here and an angle here. And especially when we're just getting going, with this, what we're doing here, this goes in the category of box modeling. You're starting off with some sort of cube and then slowly transforming it into some thing. We want to only add geometry when necessary. We want to be stingy with our geometry. And so back over here, I can grab that over there and then press E over here to extrude this up right where I would want it to be. Again, by pressing E over here, it goes straight up. I'm not making some sort of weird angle as if I tried to extrude it over here, right? And then same thing with this one. I can press E again and bring this up here, and then just G to move this to where I would need, and then R in order to get that angle quite right. If I want to pull this further in that direction, again, switching it to local or normal. Local is not going to work because local is for the object. Normal gives me the actual normals for whatever I currently have selected. And so that is correct there. Okay, so that gives us the piece there. definitely kind of how we want. We need to start planning a little bit. So this piece is fairly thick. It's like one of the thicker parts. And then we're going to have this piece here in the front. And so I might use part of this as the starting part for the front as a way to sort of move a little bit quicker. So remember I'm still in edit mode here. Whoops, let's not do that. If we were to Shift D, it gives us another piece in the same object. Notice that we still have singular object here. And so I can move this into a relative space, and then especially if I'm in wireframe here, I can just sort of delete those vertices, giving me this part down here. Maybe come back to this view. There we go. And so now I can either select it up here or over here, or if I come back to face selection, actually there's no face there, and so I could use vertices, and so G, and sort of puts us where we need, and coming in here, can sort of dial this in exactly as you would need it. Okay, let's go ahead and keep saving incremental. Okay, now these, let's see if there's something in the reference that sort of gives us, it's tough to tell. These are definitely inset from the other part, right? So they're kind of thinner boards that connect these two main legs of the chair. And so in order to do these, we're going to need to make sure that we are inset, and then we can bridge between these things here. So this is going to be, in order to establish these in all directions, right? Because they're here on the side, they're just here and here. But on this side, let's go ahead and we're going to need to add, we want extrude will bridge between here and here, but we need the geometry to bridge to. And so we're going to need some loop cuts here, and then here and there. So let's add those in. So our Control R here, click. Zoom out so you see the whole thing when you're doing this. Control R, because it starts in the middle. Then you click and you can move it to where you need. I'm going to go a little bit outside, and then Control R again, click, and go a little bit outside once again. And then over here, same thing. And so if I come over here and Control R, click, I can move this to about where I want, and Control R, click, and move that to about where I want. There we go. Cool. All right, and so now let's look at how this is going to happen. Over here, what we're going to do is do an inset here and an inset there, and then bridge those two things. And so here's one where we could definitely do it a little bit more easily over here. I'm going to turn off the X-ray. What is the shortcut for that? It's X, isn't it? Alt-Z, of course. Okay. I mean, I'm sure X is something else. Okay. Don't press X. Okay, so I is going to inset this. I want it to be a little bit thinner, and so then I might bring that in a little bit like this. And then on the other side, we can do the same thing. Over here, select this one, and I for inset, and then sort of make that a little bit thinner. Try and make those match. as much as possible. And now we want to bridge these two. And so I am going to first delete that face, not the vertices, just the face. And that puts a hole in the object. I see red inside. That's what I should be seeing there. And over here, I can delete this face as well. Then I can Alt-click this, because we've been really precise while modeling. You know, the tools like Loop Select and Loop Cut work in our favor. So Alt-click, Shift-Alt-click, and then right-click and it should be over here if you have Loop Tools installed. I've been having some problems with the add-ons. Let me just make sure I have Loop Tools. Loop Tools Bridge, and that does exactly what one would hope. So yeah, this tool functions pretty well when there's no, I mean, we have two squares being connected. One of the problems is that maybe if something went weird, like the order, and so this twist is, you know, something you can use to untwist it to get it correctly set up there. You can also dial in the number of segments here for whatever is happening, but we just want one for right now. But you can see I could use this for a bunch of different things depending on what it is that you'd want to do here. Let's go back to 0 and put this back at 0. You need to step back here. There we go. So again, you don't get that Loop Tools Bridge without Loop Tools on. There we go. Just to show you what the tool is capable of, we're not using any of that fancy stuff. We just simply want to connect those two things. That's pretty good. Let's save incremental. And then let's look up here. And so we need to create similar structures here. And then also over here for this, for the seat. Let's do this one. And over this way. Actually, let's look over here and give ourselves, we have the geometry we need here. Probably need another loop cut here. And so with that in mind, I'm also going to perhaps extend this just a little bit more so I have some room to connect there. If this runs into the seat, we're going to make the seat a separate cube as a starting point there. That's fine. We don't want like oodles of internal geometry that's never seen. But a little bit of overlapping is fine. And so we can do that. Let's come over here, this mode, make sure we grab all of these, and then move these up just slightly into there. So it gives us some room to have the loop cut there, so it's easy to bridge. And so now let's set up our cuts over here. I'm going to Control R, click, and move that up just outside. Come in here. And Control R, and then move that just outside there. And let's get the other side set up. So this will work on the bottom, and then Control R, whoops, over here. Make sure I didn't. one of the dangers here is just making extra cuts by accident. And so just try to be precise in your actions there. About like that. And we can do a similar sort of thing. We can come in here and inset this, scale the inset to sort of match the other ones down here, and same thing on this side. And the same way we should be able to bridge. So over here and over here, we can delete those faces, and then we can select these with the Alt click, Shift Alt click, right click, bridge. And yeah, sure, you could apply the mirror modifier later, but it's just fun to see it like automatically doubling your work right out of the. Okay, this is fairly clean. Looks good. Let's save incremental. And yeah, so we have our side railing pretty well set up here. Now we need to get our stuff connected here. Now, this is a little bit different. Whereas we use the bridge here and here, we're not going to go the whole way across, right? This is not there. This is all being generated by the modifier. So we can just merely inset and then extrude to the middle. And the mirror modifier will do the work of then connecting those pieces. So if we were to come back over here, we can look at some of this. And so let's sort of find the area we need to extrude from, which is going to be this area here. And so we can select that. And again, we can do another inset and bring this in. And then if we extrude, if we just press E and bring this out, you see it comes together, and we can then have this link up right here in the middle. You can have it close and make sure you have merge on, maybe turn up the merge distance slightly so that all that gets fused together there in the middle. If I turn it up a bunch just to demonstrate the process, right? Now if I move this back, yeah, so it's pretty big there. Here now, if I get just close enough, boom, it fuses it together. That's way too small, or way too big. That works, and we can do the same thing up here. And inset, and get this a little bit more how I want it. This looks a little skewed. I'm going to try and correct that with these points. Grab those and move them straight down. Yeah, so that's a little flatter, like so. And then we can do the same thing. We can select this and extrude. Actually, let's make sure that we are in over here when we're extruding. E. There. And let's see. Do we need the... We'll leave it as is for now. We may come back later and clean up that face, but for right now, let's leave it. Good. And so now we can do a similar thing with the rest of the chair. Same process. We can loop cut, extrude, and then over here we can again loop cut, and then extrude this way. So let's do that. I'm gonna Control R and put our cut here. Control R, put our cut there, and then down here, Control R, click, click again, Control R, click, click again, right there. And so that gives me pretty good. And then same process over here. If we were to look at this, we can extrude from here. And so inset, and then scale. Oh, I think a part of our problem is our scale is still set to the normal. We want it to be nothing's quite giving us exactly what we want here, parallel to this angle. So we'll sort of scale it in. And then use the points to correct. And if you need to grab all these points, and then you could also sort of make this parallel to the outer parts there, like that. Just hit R in the orthographic view. Again, I'm trying to make this parallel to that outside. And back here, now in this view, if we were to extrude, that comes together. Oops. Let's look at it over here. So the angle at which it's extruding, a little weird. Maybe because I pressed E over here. Let's go ahead and hit Z. E over here. Let's come straight out. And then maybe from the top, be able to look at this. Straighten that out. You see that this is an angle here, but this should all get merged together with our mirror here, so I'm not going to be too picky about that right now. And same thing on the top one here. Yeah, so before I scale that in, can make the scale requirements over here. And then adjust with the points. Yeah, that's better. That one comes straight across there. Nice. That works. This bottom one I think might need to be a little thicker because we need to actually inset again on these to make the rungs that go this way. And so that's a pretty easy adjustment. We can simply just grab these edges. So right here, let's keep it in local space. And then on the other side, yeah. I'm not a big fan of this extrusion. I'm going to do this one more time. So I can do that this way. Let's go ahead and delete these points. Vertices, there we go. And then I can alt select this, and then over here, let's extrude E. Directly into the middle. Much better. Let's save. Looking good so far. Now we need our connections here. And these we can do the same way we did down there, right? So this one we'll just inset and inset, or loop cut, inset, bridge. And then same thing here. We kind of got a little asymmetrical here, but we can adjust that with the mirror point. And so if we tab back out and come into the origins, and if I were to move this, I can move this out. And then I can also grab everything in edit mode. So I grab all of this stuff, leaving the origin where it is. That sort of moves that out. There we go. We got this hole in the middle. That's just a matter of coming in here and grabbing all these points in point mode. There we go. That looks better. Now let's go ahead and bring these two together. So I'm going to go ahead and Control R, Control R, Control R, Control R. There we go. And now over here, let's bring this in here and here. Could inset both of these at the same time, and then delete the faces. And go into edge mode. Alt click, Shift Alt click, right click, and bridge. Puts that together perfectly. Now for the other one, it sort of goes over the middle here. And so with that in mind, looks like I missed some of the points down here. Let's fix that. I thought I was in wireframe mode when I got these points. There we go. Bring that in. Yeah, getting them close enough so that they get zipped up by the mirror. I am going to put bisect and flip on so that that does now very cleanly put this together. And yeah, here we can do the same kind of thing. So let's look at this over here. And Control R here. Right about there. And Control R right about there. And then we may want these points going over the edge a little bit. Well, let's see how it goes. So this is a little bit more complicated. I'm going to turn the mirror modifier off for a second and sort of give this a little bit more of an extension. So over here, for the time being, I'm going to fill this. Just press F. And I'll move this in a little bit. And move this in. Face. There we go. And so now if we look at it, this should be over our center point, which it is. Which I think will make this a little bit easier. So now, same kind of thing. Over here. We should be able to inset these at the same time. Delete face, delete face, and then bridge these two. Cool. Now if I turn this back on, we should be pretty good to go there. So as long as I have bisect and flip, depending, you may or may not need flip depending on what orientation you had to share in to start with. And so if we look at this now, this is fusing a lot of things together. Looks pretty good. Do I need to fill these holes? No, I wouldn't do it right now. Leave those as is. May affect the beveling later. But this is before we apply the modifier. And so I'm going to call this chair half and save that. And I'll just Control C let's go into object mode and Control C, Control V, and turn that off to leave it, keep it as a history. Now I've got this, and so I want to apply the mirror modifier, and so let's do that there. And now if I look at this, I should have a line down the middle. We shouldn't have any internal geometry because we had that bisect on. And we can look at that if we turn it on to X-ray here. And yeah, if I go inside, it's very small, so it's going to be tough. Cool, very clean, all quads, no unnecessary geometry, right? So super, super efficient. This is going to be chair frame, and let's do the seat now. And so if we're looking at this, we can do the seat. Obviously we can start off as a cube and have the cube, sort of scale the cube appropriately. Need to get that angle right, and then it needs to sort of fit into the top-down view of the chair. And so let's start this as a separate object. I'm going to Shift A, make sure I tab out, and Shift A as a cube, and then tab in, and try and get this appropriately lined up. Let's come back to here, bring this up, scale this way down. Okay, we got the basics of what we want here. Let's try and get this angle a little bit more representative. So I can just go R, try and get that parallel to our sketch like so. And that's pretty close. We can sort of dial in some of the other parts. Let's look down from the top up here. Right, so it needs to come in towards this. I'm going to turn this back off, back to here, look at it from the top. And let's do that. I'm going to go to wireframe mode, over to here to the edges, or sorry, points. And so now I can move this exactly to where I would want it. And then if we look at the sketch here, we didn't line this one up from the top. It's usually just more trouble than it's worth. But this comes in, we should probably stop right about there. And then these two need to be rounded. And so this is something that's, the whole thing is going to get beveled to get those nice edges. But this is clearly the bevel tool here in order to create this rounding. And then we'll use the bevel modifier on the rest of it. And so if we look at this, let's get something a little more contrasty so I can see what I'm doing. right about there, like that. And then we need to bevel these two here. And so I'm going to, let's look at this from the top over here. And try to round those. So edge mode here and here. And then over here to the bevel tool. And let's look at it from the top over here. And if we click and drag, we can see how that's contributing to those corners, maybe about like that. And we clearly need to get some rounding in there. 6 seems like a pretty good one. It's going to be reasonably circular. That looks pretty good. These aren't too close to anything else there, so that looks pretty good. And yeah, let's look at this. Yeah, I like what we have so far. Okay, and so now let's call this chair seat. And then we're going to want to combine both of these things. So I'm going to Control-C, Control-V the seat, and Control-C, Control-V the frame, and then turn off the historical versions and keep these two here, grab both of them, and Control-J, and this will just be chair entire. And there we go. It's all one thing now for both the UV unwrapping and for beveling. So now we can just add a single bevel modifier for our edges. And so let's see what it looks like with one. But let's make sure the whole thing's set to shade smooth. See, that kind of obliterates it. But if we go to harden normals, that should, I think, give us a pretty good look. And let's go to 2, actually. So that's pretty simple for the unwrap there. If we see if we can see the shading difference with 1, 2. Nope, that's pretty similar. But 2 should be better for the unwrap. Now, we are not, let me write this down. Do not apply bevel modifier before unwrapping. It's going to make the unwrapping way more difficult, right? It could quadruple the amount of time you spend unwrapping, negotiating all the bevels. What we're going to leverage here is that we're going to unwrap the simple geometry that's unbeveled. Unwrap unbeveled geo. And then when we export, the bevel will be baked in to the UV. So let's do that. Again, I'm just going to turn this off for now, knowing that it looks good. And maybe while I'm working, I'll put it back on shade flat so it doesn't look weird. And now we can do our unwrapping of this. I'm going to save incremental once again. Let's go to our UV space. There we go. And now I'm going to go ahead and do a few things. One is that I will options, turn on live unwrap. We did that before, right? So that every time we add a seam, it automatically unwraps it over here. And let's come over here and bring in our mesh checker material. You can see, right now, when this happens, when you see this, you should feel bad, right? This should look disturbing to you. You're like, oh no. I mean, look at that. That's some stretched texels right there. Now let's go ahead and get this happening. I think we're good. We've got that. Let's start with the seat, which should be pretty easy peasy. And so we should be able to alt click along the bottom there and mark a seam. And then if you want to see all of the seat parts, again, just select one part and Control L, and we should be able to see all of it. Now, the size and placement of things over here is not super important. Let's double check and make sure, yeah, before you start all this unwrapping and mapping and everything, double check again that your object scale is 1:1:1, or else it'll all be skewed and weird. That's good. And so this up here tends to be kind of strange. So we cut that down, and I'm going to go ahead and cut another seam here and here. And so let's come in here under edges and select them here. Come over here and say, oh, we can only do that with this on. There we go, I forgot about that. Here and here, right click and mark seam. There we go. See that cutting that seam there lets this top get way flatter, so that's good. And now on the rest of the chair here, the general pattern is that we won't be able to cut off each of these rungs and then let them be separate pieces. So first, let's get all the rungs. And so I should be able to alt-click a lot of these loops cut off the other part. There we go. So those got separated. And now up here, getting there. With the live unwrap on, you can sort of see things getting better step by step. That's good. But each of these is essentially, it's like a tube, right? So for all of them, we need to have some cut, some seam rather, along the length. And so where do you put the seam? Do you put it like on this inside edge or the back edge? Again, we'll be able to cover it up with triplanar projection. I'm going to put it up in like the internal inside edge. So here, this is one where the loop cut isn't going to work. You'll select here and then Control Shift click to get that whole line, and then mark seam, and then you see that this immediately looks like this, right? Which is perfect, like laid flat, these holes in it, very little distortion on that. Same thing up here. And so let's click here, Control Shift click there, mark seam. There we go, we got two of them. Okay, good. Now along this part over here, let's do the same thing for these other rungs. And so I'm going to just alt click Shift alt click Let's see, can I get all 8 of them? Shift alt click, Shift alt click. There we go. And mark seam. That's good. It's a big step forward. And now these edges. And so here, here, oops. Again, along the lengths of these rungs, you need to make sure you have a seam. Boom. See, immediately this is getting much better here. Now our rungs down here. Let's alt click here. Shift alt click. Shift alt click. Whoops. And here. Much better. And now along the length, let's see. Oh, these need seams. So here, here, and over here. There we go. And now these things. So these are really the only ones with caps on the end. And so no way around it. We need to be able to cut those off. So I'll put the flap where it's connected on the front, like so. So click, shift, shift, and same thing over here. And then let's cut down the inside edge down here. So 3 of the 4 sides. Let's keep it consistent so it can lay flat. So it's the inside edge here. Click, 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 and mark seam. And then we need something that goes along the entire inside length. So click, Control Shift click the whole way up. Right click, mark seam. That's a big step forward. And over here, on the other side, I'm trying to make this symmetrical. And again, the inside, click, and then Control Shift click, and mark seam. See, this is getting laid out more and more like this is an IKEA chair. Like all the IKEA things have, most of them have these blueprints, which makes it great for this project. But you know, it's starting to look like what that stuff looks like when you open the box and then start putting it together. And now, almost there, right? So now looking at this, you can see as we're with the live unwrap on, where it's just continually unwrapping, you can see order coming to the sections that we've unwrapped properly, right? And where there's disorder, clearly here are the front legs. And when we look over here, like, yeah, that's like, what is that? There's nothing that looks like a giant jagged spear in this chair. I don't know, what is that? And so we need to unwrap these. I mean, could I just cut off the bottom things? I don't know, I guess, but you know, maybe we stage the chair pushed over or something. And so in this case, I won't. Mark those. And in this case, we might need to come in here to make sure, actually those are, we didn't fill that in at the top. And so we just need to, we should just need to mark the inside seam here. And so Control Shift. This one's a little bit tricky because it does come in here. And so there we go, mark seam, and then over here. Boom, there we go. And so now if we come back over here, you just sort of see it continually unwrapping itself over there. And yeah, that should make a lot of sense when you're looking at it, right? As if you made all of this out of cardboard and you just had to cut, you just literally folded these pieces around. Shouldn't be a bunch of weird distortion here. Looks good. Let's see if we can adjust that. Well, let's repack once and see what happens. Actually, we'll grab everything now that's properly unwrapped. And let's see if we can, any of our unwrap methods change here. So I'm going to say U and angle-based, conformal. There we go. Conformal gives us exactly what we don't get that strange. And minimum stretch. Yeah, I can't. Let's see if the documentation is a little more illuminating here. Yeah, so here's the official word. Angle-based, 2D representation, conformal, less accurate UV, performs better on simpler objects. Okay, our object's pretty simple. Minimum stretch, uses scalable, locally injective mapping. Oh yes, of course, slim, yes. Tries to minimize distortion for both areas and triangles, areas and angles. Let's see, did that give us the same result here if we went to that one? It's interesting that it angles this one, not that one. I think because of this edge. Does this one have an extra cut somewhere? Which one is this? Over here. Oh yeah, right here. You see how that one seam changes how it projects over there. Interesting. And so that does not need to be a seam. Clear that seam, and then it makes everything perfectly straight over there. Wow, interesting. U. There we go. A, U. Yeah. And so now looks exceedingly good. Looks pretty well packed here, but we'll run the algorithm anyway. Let's do average island size, which has been doing. Yeah, so again, it's trying to maximize pixel density there, but especially in this case, because we're going to make sort of two versions of this, like a nice looking table and chairs and then like a banged up version from Substance Painter. And so these are going to be, you know, like wood or have wood grain on them, and having this you know, makes that just more work. You can overcome it, but it's not and so like, is it worth that to eke out this tiny bit of extra space here? Probably not. Let's see if it does any. I mean, you can only get so good here, right? Like with, if you don't want to rotate things and you don't want to distort them, there's, you know, like this is a whole, people much smarter than I have spent their entire lives trying to figure this kind of stuff out. Like there's all of these, I've only recently gotten interested in this kind of stuff, like packing math algorithms in terms of like how, you know, have we truly optimized how many golf balls you could fit in this trash can, you know, that physics allows or whatever. And there's people working on all that kind of stuff. So there's a limit to how good this can be here. And so in this pack islands here, I would say don't rotate, but feel free to scale and see if it get any better. I mean, I don't know. I guess that looks slightly better. I mean, it's tough to say. The only thing here is that because we're going to unwrap it with the bevel here that's going to get applied on the way out, I might give my islands a little more room to breathe. And so let's come back and run it one more time, and then bump this up. Maybe 0.00. Let's look at the 0.005. And now there's a little bit of extra space, which I think should make it easier to not have problems when we export this. And let's, yeah. So let's save. Okay. Oh, and then just while I'm remembering it, so the render kit, I mean, we haven't proven this, but added render kit and then crashed in the class before, even though render kit did work for it worked for 12 renders and then failed on this 13th. So I can't say for sure that was render kit, but if you're having excessive crash problems, try removing the render kit, not Blender kit, render kit add-on, and cross your fingers. You know, like, I don't know. Like this feels, the crash, whether or not the add-ons are responsible for the crashes, feels a lot like the situation that used to be the case. But, you know, like when I started doing this, we had Mac computers here a long time ago. And I've since stopped using Mac computers, and so is the school for these classes because they're ridiculously expensive. Mostly. I mean, I like the operating system and everything. And also now, I mean, you can't really run all the stuff you need to run. But, yeah, like in terms of figuring like which add-on is causing Blender to crash, like it seems like it'd be tough to sort of figure it out unless you did the thing where you kind of like turned half the add-ons off and then worked and see if it crashed. And then if not, then you know it's in that half. And so it would be a long road. Anyways, let's export this. Let's make sure our anchor point is okay, actually. Looks good. And shade smooth. Turn the bevel back on. And then let's go ahead and export this. Only selected, FBX. And let's look in here how it works out. So I'm going to go ahead and save. And then if I were to bring in what I just exported as the FBX, you can see what's going on here. So here, here, and right here. Oh, I put 2025. And so, yeah, when it does the incremental save, we're on, this is like Blade Runner now. This is chair 2032. This is like the chairs we're going to use. Yeah, I mean, this sounds really futuristic to me, but like now that's less than 10 years away. So that's weird. And so over here, we can see what happened on export. There's our bevels, nicely put on all of the edges of all the things. Again, leaving the bevel at 2 there may be some very minor slight inconsistencies. That's, yeah, I zoomed way in there, way in. If you needed 100% control, then you would need to apply the bevel and manage it yourself. But as far as now I think about it, you know, I'll have to look. Maybe there's an add-on for that in terms of like automatically bridging the bevels with the UV seams that you have. I don't know. There's an add-on for everything. But there we go. And in here, let's make a new one. Let's bring in our wonderful new chair. No all-in-one wrap. There we go. Nice. Okay, of course I forgot to remove my UV checker, so it does that over there. You can rename this, and so this will be chair. Just one texture set for the chair, clearly. You know, we went through all this trouble to get everything nicely set up there, even with the tabs for these things. And so since this is all laid out, right, this, thinking about how, you know, I'm not a carpenter. I could not make this chair for real. But, I mean, I do, you know, these kind of long lengths of wood would usually have our grain going along that length, right? And it would also be consistent. So for instance, with any of these wood textures, if I were to bring this in here, just projecting it in UV, right here, it's wrong. But if you look at it, it's wrong everywhere, which is exactly what you want, kind of, right? In that it's going across here. All we have to do to correct this is simply rotate exactly 90 degrees, not changing the triplanar. I just rotated regular in regular UV projection. And now all of the grain runs along all of the pieces because they all are beautifully set out north-south here, like this in our UV map. And so now what was wrong everywhere is right everywhere, right? We've got it all set out there. There may be some issues we want to address, right? So we've got this here, right, because that goes around like that. Again, if we want to change projection for just one part of it, we would need to mask that out. But that's, you know, not too bad here. If we just duplicate this layer and then make a black mask, and then just make sure we grab these parts here. And so that's pretty easy, either in mesh. Mesh is the one-click solution. If you pick UV, you'd have to click twice. But now, you know, in this one, we could come back and triplanar map this to get better control over how this goes around the edge there, I think. And this is all super bumpy. And so, first of all, this is a material. Let's look here. In terms of when it's too bumpy, it's like, do I need to turn down the normal or do I need to turn down the height? First thing is to look at the material. There's no normal here. And so this is all in the height. And so we can come over to the height and, you know, just really start to get things to where we want. I kind of want the grain actually a little bit smaller. And so a little bit of the tiling adjustment there. And over here, these are showing through, and so we want our height here to cover up the one over there. So that's always, we need to come back and say replace, I think. And so now, how can I tell? If I come down here and I change the tiling, nope, still showing through. Normal. I'm on the height. Yes, 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 yes. Oh, probably because I turned this down. That's why it's showing 3. If I make it 100% and put it on replace, now, yes, right, it doesn't do that. So how do I make it look less bumpy without doing this? So yeah, this is the quickest solution, but not the solution in every instance, right? The better solution is to add a levels to the height channel. And bring down your input and output to properly attenuate that. Can we copy this filter? Yes. Why didn't I think of that before? Okay. Let's look at some of the putting paint on this. Well, actually, let's make some of our own wood first, right? And just sort of a demonstration there. Let's see how we can get that going. So we want a grain pattern, and we want that to affect what's happening. So fill layer here, and let's come over, and we have a a bunch of these, and they're going to be procedural. And so, for instance, right now, I think I'd probably go onto the height channel. There we go. And again, grab our levels. If you select the texture itself, let's see, seed, right? So it's procedurally generated. You can sort of get different versions of it. Every black and white thing has an invert button, sort of balance between the two of them, although doing that kind of works against the levels, our contrast of it there, the tiling amount, get some greater density on what's going on with the wood pattern there. But let's think about this. You know, what's going to go along with the wood grain? Certainly the height, but what else of our other channels? What's that? Roughness, the color too, right? And so it might be better to do this as an anchor point that we can then have one source without having to duplicate this. So with that in mind, I'm going to make a new fill layer here. We want to store this as is. And so let's come in here, and we'll just put it on the color channel for now. And then this will be my wood anchor, or wood grain pattern, and then I'll make a new fill layer on top, and let's read that where we need to, right? And so now I can read that in, well, we need the anchor point first. Add anchor point. In this case, we put it on the color channel, and so we need to know that when we read it. And so up here, just in the height, at first, we will read this, and then we need to make sure that we say it's in the color. There we go. And then we can add, this will be the wood. And let's go ahead and add the levels to the height. We're going to have a lot of levels on this, but now we can sort of dial this in how we would want. We can read it on the roughness. Again from the color, and again change it with the levels. Right, so if we want things to generally be rougher, we start moving things this way towards this end. And then now if we, let's do one more on the color. So we'll add the color here, anchor point, again reading the color, but on the color we'll come in and add a filter, and this is going to be the gradient. And so here we can grab colors, there we go, and I think I just have my roughness on the wrong one there. Here, this is only on color. There we go. With the gradient, I wish this was more like the gradients in the other programs, but you can dial up the number of colors here so that you have some more options. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Now, the big advantage is that now if I want to change out, first of all, let's save this file. Let's save as. I've got this feeding into the roughness right here. I've got the same thing feeding into the height, which I can sort of turn up or down here. And then if I want to just experiment with some different wood grain patterns, I just come back down to here in the color channel. And so back to wood here in the texture set. And so that's this one. If I want to see what this one would look like, just drag this in here. Everything updates the whole way up the chain, the power of the anchor point there, right? For some reason, this one is left-right, where that one's up-down. Again, it's just a matter of rotating here, and everything updates, right? And then over here, I don't like that one. See what sort of procedural, right? This is like knots and number of knots. Can this go above 1? No. Inverted. Let's look at this one. There we go. I like that. Let's make it more of a dark wood. Maybe a little bit more. Let's make some adjustments in that gradient. So here, maybe like walnut. Isn't that like a really nice dark wood? And for something like this, like that. And so this could be something where we come in and try to and let's see how that looks now. That's looking better. I want stronger grain. It's back here. Opening that up starts to give us a little bit more of what we're looking for under roughness here. I wanted it to be shinier, sort of reach back in that direction some more. Nice. Yeah, pretty interesting wood texture here. This one, I feel like this should be more here. keep more of it a little bit darker. Right, so all reading that same pattern. Nice. And then we could lay, like, that's a really good base. Let's save. I like the way that that's looking. We never baked the mesh maps. We'll do a little bit of, definitely some shading in these nooks and crannies. And so let's bake the mesh maps. This should be a pretty straight ahead bake. Nothing too weird here. I'm just going to make sure that under curvature, let's get a little bit more radius and a little bit more rays and see how that works out. Everybody still there with me on the live stream? Let's see, do we get the mesh maps? Yeah, okay, they're there. I feel like this is kind of, well, it's a dark thing. I feel like we just need more light. And so over here, our environment map, we get like a brighter studio in here. And environment exposure, there we go. That gives us a little bit more light. Cool. So now let's start to do some fun things over top. So for instance, you know, some extra detail on the grain. This gives us what we want, but we probably just need some like tiny, you know, noisy detail. And so I'll make a new fill layer here just for height. It's going to be, you know, grain detail and just that on. And let's look for some noise. Maybe a little of this. And again, probably a 90-degree. There we go. We don't need very much of this. Just to add a little bit of extra detail here. So just trying to make it small. And then in this case, probably can just mix in a tiny bit. So again, that shift key allows me to just get a little taste of some extra height there. And maybe we want some of that in the roughness as well. But give it a different seed. There we go. And again, in the roughness channel, salt to taste. Cool. So that gives the material a little bit more dimensionality there. There we go. With, just a little bit extra thing on top and gives some tinier detail there. Cool. Now, let's go ahead and save. Let's look at maybe some paint over top, depending on what you'd want to, you know, like maybe there's a whole version like this that looks nice, but let's do a more weathered version. And so, you know, let's save and do save as weathered chair. And over here. Yeah, we got some paint over top. Whoops. Don't want to erase that green detail. I want to put this over top. And I'm going to go something this. There we go. So we get that paint over top of grain look there. And now, one of the fun ones here, filter-wise, is the paint peeling effect. And you can see what this does. So it gives us these paint peels, and it's also being informed by some of the edge wear there. And so the peeling level, these are these extra bits of peeling there. Distance. Where's my curvature? Right, so these are just different noises sort of put together to make this effect that's sort of on top of some of the work there. Let's see. So it's a really dramatic height effect here by default. Under the technical parameters here, you can sort of deal with some of that. Got some of these straight lines. I kind of like how those work with this in this case, but that's working. Super fun. Right, how much has this chair seen? That's pretty good. Let's go back up to the spray paint here. So this is one where we have this color, paint roughness variation. And turn that up. Sort of get more variations there. That's good, but the paint color is kind of flat everywhere, the same. So this is one of those ones where I might want to give it a little bit more color variation, right? So let's do, we just want variations across the surface here. Now I wasn't going to put a cushion on this chair, but if you wanted to make one to put on there, looks comfortable with me. I mean, do you need one, Bo? Let's see. Let's go ahead and make a new fill layer. Let's get some variations in color in here, maybe driven by the corners. So that means we could access the curvature. Right, and so remember, your mesh maps are directly accessible here. So there we go, that gives us this, but we need it softer, way softer. And so I'm gonna blur this with a right click and a blur. Now I can sort of blur that. And now we want just different colors here. So you guessed it, we're going to do the gradient here under filter, again over here with the gradient, and here. And I'm just going to give us some contrasting colors. And see if we can get a little bit of all of this on the hook there. There we go. And so it's variations across the surface driven by the shape, right? And so now this will be color variation, and it is only color information. And so I wanted to affect the stuff below. I'm going to put it in multiply mode. Make sure I'm in the right stack. Let me undo that, go back to the color stack. There we go. Now I'll put it in multiply mode. There we go. And now, with this, opacity of this, sort of bring in a little bit of it. Just sort of just get some more changes in color value across the surface. You could experiment here with your blend modes. What does overlay look like? And so now, some parts a little bit more blue, some parts a little bit more green. You could do a lot of things here, right? You could use the color, the curvature and do it. You could grab the world space normals, because that's like a big splotch of lots of color there, and do it. And, as long as you blur it and then sort of just layer it on top. And so I really want it to be this and not the wood. And so I'm going to put this stuff in a folder here. So this is affecting that. There we go. Although that is now it's not getting masked out by the paint. Because we need to mask this based on that. That's going to be more trouble than it's work. We're going to go back to this. Okay. Don't put it in a folder. Okay. That's pretty good. Now we need some dirt. Okay, so here we go, some dirt layer. Need some disgusting brown dirt. And so we could grab some, we could use a channel we're not we could do the same thing here where it's just dirt, right? So yeah, let's just use some grunges. And so in here, in textures, let's drive some on the roughness and the height and the color. So in here, in here, and then in here. There we go. And in the height itself, and then we want this to be brown or some sort of darker color here. Putting the color in multiply mode. There we go. And then right clicking, that's going to be dirt. And adding a filter for the gradient. There we go. For some there we go. Okay, so just interesting variations. Now we can bring it in. Let's start with a smart mask, right? And so in the smart mask section here, kind of like that. Remember, all of these are invertible, right? Like either they have an invert switch, or you can just add some extra ones. So here, perhaps, let's try this. And so if we bring this over there, there we go. This gives us dirt around the edges. We can, you know, bring in more or less of this. Maybe some more at the bottom. And so, I mean, I suppose just doing that by hand. So in this case, let's right click and add a paint effect. And we want to paint into the mask. And so we're going to make sure we're painting white here, and that this is going to be in which blend mode. We have to brighten the stuff below with the stuff above. Add or multiply? Add, that's right. And so this needs to be in linear dodge add. And so now come back over here and let's get some dirt splash effect. Make this bigger. And here, right, we can sort of paint this in along the bottom of the chair. It's way too much here to start. And so, also, you see how this is flipping because we have such an angular thing? It's in, by default, it is in tangent alignment. If we put it on camera, now it's sort of just at this view and showing us. And it's also coming in way too strong. And so this flow will turn this way down. So we have to like accumulate a little bit more during the painting process there. Right, so it makes it a little bit. Might need a little bit more than that, just so it doesn't take forever. Right, and so I'm just painting in some of this dirt. I think like the dirt is too shiny. We can adjust that because it's all there later. Right, and so now we get the procedural stuff plus our bespoke dirt. Someone will inevitably put a bloody handprint on the chair because that happens every time. And so we want to make the dirt less shiny back here. Right click, levels, roughness, and bring this up. There we go. Right, so shiny dirt, less shiny dirt. There we go. You can experiment with some other brushes here. Why is that so weak? Let's see. Oh, I think we were on the layer. There we go. What if you wanted to put gum on the bottom? What channels do you need to make chewed gum? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so yeah, trying to find a variation of paint peeling and everything else that works with what we've got going on here. One other thing we could do here, maybe with the channel, we got this paint effect. I'm going to add one more. So add another paint just to keep it separate. Again, put it into dodge mode. And let's use that other sort of streak brush. And so now we have things like leaking down on the chair over there. It's got a lot darker really quick. Cool, and if you want to more see the paint, the effect here, I'm trying to think if there's any way to, it doesn't really have a mask or image, but it's just curvature. Yeah, just curvature. You'd have to mask out the rest of it. I mean, you could do that. Right click and add a add a black mask. And, or in this case, we just want to take part out. And so we'll do the unusual thing and add a white mask. And then we'll paint black into it. And so here, let's come back in and maybe grab some of this. And in order to make this work, it needs to be the opposite. We need to be painting. Here we have black. We're masking that. There we go. It takes that out. Need a softer brush. like that. Want it to be grungier. Yeah, like that. Right, and so this is wearing away the paint to give us more of what's underneath. Again, when we see that stretching coming across there, again, we're in tangent. See how it aligns like that? And so usually for this kind of effect stuff, putting it in camera makes a little more sense. You don't get that streaking across the side there. Okay, I feel like this chair now has been through some stuff. Yeah, one brush was a little weird on the bottom, but, you know, whatever. Okay, there we go. All right, so yeah, for this week is putting together the table and chairs and painting them twice. Once, you know, nice, and then another one, you know, have at it with some other, you know, make it look more weathered there. I'm not going to do the table. You want to use the same techniques I used on the chair on the table, right? And if you model at the scale, it's all good to go. If you want to paint them together, that's probably a good idea. So model one, model the other, and then what? In this case, I would just put separate materials on them. So they each have, so you get to paint them at the same time, but they would each have their own separate texture set, right? Yeah, I mean, for our purposes, making a really good looking render, that'll be the simplest workflow. You know, if you had to be really, really efficient, you could put them into the same UV space there. Cool. Yeah, especially with the roughness variation across the surface, as we see the light moving across it, I think there's some nice things there. If we wanted to see what it looked like. With really nice lighting, we could dial up our iRay render here and see how that looks. So yeah, in that kind of environment where we're seeing that, like so, maybe the height is a little strong, but you wouldn't need to make that, like it's very close, right? And so making any additional tweaks at this point is not super strategically smart, right? You want to put it in your final render environment, and then, you know, we'd be talking about decimal point changes to the strength of the normal map, right? In order to get it exactly how you'd want it there. Cool. All right. Yeah, I think we're good here. Everybody good with knocking off 15 minutes early? Do we need a full 5 hours of class this week? I feel like we've covered a lot already. The feedback I get is that there's a lot more in these classes than some other classes sometimes. So, all right, awesome. Anything from there? Everybody there online? Alec is online, Bo's online, Sonic the Hedgehog is online. Thomas K is online. Isaac. Okay, looks like everybody's good. Backpack's online. Bo says he says no, I'm Hood. All right. Yeah, I know. And yeah, Bo commented the most, so he gets the purple crown this time. Yeah, it was a real horse race here. We went back and forth between Bo and Isaac, and now Thomas just overtook Isaac to take the number 2. Does it even show these after the fact in the chat? It does? Yeah. Awesome. All right, I'll talk to you guys on Wednesday. I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody's spaceship renders, getting your spaceship through the process, right? We're going to take some time to tweak that as we move forward here. So, try and get as close as you can. But I know some of you are having some issues with the workflow and the greebles. And yeah, like if some of your greebles are just giving you, if the greebles give you the greeblies, like like we made a bunch of greetables. We made enough greebles that if you had to get rid of a greeble because it was just like, giving you a lot of problems with your UVs or with the texture painting or whatever, just delete the greeble, right? And you can go from there, right? We're at the point of the project where we've made a bunch of stuff, and so now we need to get some sort of usable final image together. And if you need to solve some technical problems by just simply removing them out of there, that's totally doable. Okay, awesome. I'll talk to everybody on Wednesday.